Live on WFLA Now. With a specialized degree in climate, Chief Meteorologist and Climate Specialist Jeff Berardelli is pioneering the way we look at climate and extreme weather. Welcome to Jeff's Climate Classroom, powered by ArmorView Window and Door.
All right, welcome everybody. In this special edition of Climate Classroom, we're going to be talking about Hurricane Helene's aftermath. Now, despite precise predictions from weather forecasters days in advance, the storm still managed to shock and surprise many with very atypical kind of outsized impacts in the Bay Area and beyond. We had record surge connected the Gulf of Mexico to Tampa Bay. It washed over our barrier islands into Tampa and St. Petersburg, right into the metro neighborhoods as well, where people had feet of water in their house. Meanwhile, in the southern Appalachians, we had biblical rainfall and flooding, 3 feet in spots. It wiped towns off the map. Really heartbreaking. I think the question on a lot of people's minds is, how is this possible for a storm where the center of the storm tracked 100 miles to the west of St. Petersburg? Why was it so devastating? We're going to talk about the impacts here in the Bay Area. We'll also talk about the impacts in the Carolinas as well, and Georgia. And what is next in the Gulf of Mexico? Something is brewing. So what exactly will come out of the Gulf of Mexico? And today we're going to be answering your questions. More importantly, we're going to spend a lot of time doing a Q&A. So with all that said, I want to bring up my co-host for the show. Here is Val Simpson. Hey,
Hi,
Val.
everybody. Really good episode. I feel like there's a lot to unpack here. And also, I want to remind you that I'm going to be tracking your comments and questions on our Facebook Live. That's where we are right now. So you can find us there. Leave your questions for Jeff, and I'll make sure to reach out to you, or I'll reach out to Jeff and get that question answered for you. But I know that we do have a lot to talk about. And whenever you're ready, Jeff, just take it away.
Yeah, so like Val said, please put your questions on Facebook. So today, Val, I went to the doctor, and the medical technician was talking to me about her house. Now, she lives in Rocky Point. She had a couple of feet of water in her house. They have to throw away the cabinets. They have to throw away the refrigerator, the stove.
Gosh.
They basically have had to get rid of the drywall. Now they have to figure out, how they're going to repair all this damage. Yeah. And they have flood insurance, luckily, because they're near the water. So many people do not have flood insurance. So they're in a better space than other people. Yeah. But FEMA is not going to help them, whereas FEMA will help people who don't have as much coverage. It's interesting because FEMA has to pick and choose. There's so many people hit by this disaster in Florida, in Georgia, in the Carolinas. There's not enough money to go around. So FEMA really has to pick and choose for the people who really need it the most. Unfortunately, it means that a lot of people are really suffering right now, not only because they have to clean up from this disaster, they have to worry about how they're going to get the money to rebuild it and how quickly they can rebuild with everybody competing for resources.
That is a big statement right there. There's not enough money to go around. And I think that a lot of it has to do with the fact that we're seeing some of these disasters more often than we used to.
Too many disasters, Val. If you remember, earlier this summer, we had Debbie. Debbie produced disastrous flooding in Sarasota County. Oh, yeah. Homes were flooded out. Everybody down there was saying, we've never seen anything like this before, and we've lived here for X amount of years. Yeah. Then fast forward a few more weeks into the summer, and we end up with 2 back-to-back days where we have such heavy downpours in downtown Tampa and St. Pete and Pinellas County too, that we end up with basically historic flooding from just everyday downpours. Yeah. And now we do it all over again. Luckily, we didn't get the rain, but this time we got the storm surge that washed across the barrier islands into the bay and across the urban areas. Yeah. And then it hits North Carolina even harder. That wiping towns off the map.
Towns, roads, everything. Yeah. It's really unfortunate what we went through with Helene and what we're still going through. And we're watching an area, like you mentioned initially during the start of the episode, that might bring us some increase in rain chances for the weekend. And people are right now trying to clean up. The people are right now putting all their efforts into trying to rebuild. And, well, the cleanup comes first. But, yeah, it's just bad timing.
So what I have up on the map here that you see is how high surge we had. Now, this is on top of high tide. Unfortunately, we got unlucky. Yeah. That high tide happened later in the evening and in the overnight after midnight, and it coincided with that onshore flow and some of the worst surge. So we ended up with 6 to 7 feet of surge in the bay and in Clearwater Beach, then on top of the high tide. Yeah. So in general, we ended up with around 9 feet of water in places, 9 feet above where it should have been. And so every single site hit a record, and we hit it by around 2.5 feet. Okay.
Wow.
Now, here's the thing, Val, because you forecast in this weather department just like we do. This storm was extraordinarily well predicted. Several days out, we knew that the center of the storm was headed towards the Big Bend. National Hurricane Center's forecast, the very first cone, even before it was a named system, was headed towards that area. And this is what the medical technician said to me today, because I asked her, I said, okay, what could I have done differently? What could us meteorologists have said to you that would have convinced you to leave, to evacuate, and would have convinced you to try to secure the stuff on the first floor of your home?
What did she
said,
say?
Nothing.
Really?
Nothing, because they went through a dahlia. And they just didn't expect that a storm that didn't hit the eye and the eye wall didn't come right over Tampa Bay, that it could have produced this much damage. She said this storm took the exact track as a dahlia, seemed like it was as strong as a dahlia, so we expected exactly what a dahlia delivered. Now, I, leading up to it, often said to people, we're going to expect to be, if you were flooded in a dahlia, expect to be flooded and add probably a couple of feet on top of that.
I remember you saying that,
But I still don't think it translated. And I don't think it translated because people have experience with storms around here. And they know that so many times these storms pass far enough away that they don't give us the storm surge. And they couldn't have expected that a storm that passed, it was basically a direct hit of storm surge on the Bay Area without a direct hit of the core of the storm. And I think there was a huge disconnect there. Now, for meteorologists, we know that what matters most when it comes to these storms is the size of the storm. Okay. So let me go back to show you the storm, and it's huge. It was like 450 miles across. It was one of the biggest storms in the Gulf of Mexico over the past 25 years. It was as big as just about any other storm. And by the way, the power that it dissipated was twice that, or more than twice that, of a dahlia. And it was even more than Hurricane Ian, the power that it dissipated. So that's what it is, right? The bigger the storm is, the more power it has, to push that storm surge over the Barrier Island and into our neighborhoods. And that's what happened. But I still think to myself, Val, as you know, we've been talking about this too. What could I, as a forecaster, have done differently? And I think it was hold people's hands. And what I mean by that is tell people, look, folks, I realize that you've been through a lot of storms. I realize that it's not coming directly at us. But you have to at least take your valuable stuff and put it on the second floor of your house. Or take your cars, move them off the back. People texted me and said, hey, Jeff, should I move my cars? And I said, get them off the Barrier Islands. So it was that specific information I think would have helped people. But I also think that it just is unimaginable that a storm... go ahead.
Let me ask you this. So do you think that the technician, now having gone through this experience, do you think that next time they might evacuate?
Yes, and next time it probably won't be as bad, right? That's the problem that we have, is we have to warn every storm. Idalia produced about 4.5 feet of surge, so that flooded some people's homes. But this storm, and that was a record, by the way. We've been keeping records for about 40 years. The surge with this storm was the highest surge we've seen in over 100 years. Not since the 1921 storm that we talk about all the time, which is the last major hurricane that hit us. And by the way, that hit us directly. It hit Tarpon Springs. So you would expect. We got 11 feet of surge.
I heard you say something a couple of days ago, probably a day or two ago, and I'm going to share it with you, and then you can add to it. But you said something like, Tampa will remember this hurricane season because even though it may not have been so extreme as predicted initially, for Tampa Bay, it will be remembered as an extreme season.
Yeah, we've already seen 4 storms make landfall in the Gulf of Mexico this year. And I think only about 4 or 5 seasons in history, since we've been keeping records back in the 1800s, have had 4 landfalling storms in the Gulf. We could see another one next week, although it's going to be very weak. So although we so far at least hadn't seen as many systems as we thought, and the summer was pretty quiet. One thing that does happen during La Nina years, and now we're transitioning to La Nina, we tend to have more storms that make landfall. And so this will be remembered in the Bay Area as a disastrous hurricane season, with Debbie causing all that flooding, and now this storm as well. Now, obviously, the other part of this storm, and let me bring the graphic up here for you. It's going to be somewhat similar to the graphic we already have, although it's going to extend a little further. I want to talk about why Helene was such a disastrous storm for the Carolinas. Okay.
Yeah.
So let me show you this radar graphic. Hopefully it works out for me. Just give me,
Yeah.
let me go to the front of the graphic. All right. So, all right, let's press play. I want you to notice that 2 days before Helene hit, or a day and a half, notice how it's already raining in the Carolinas. See all that heavy rain? That's called a predecessor event. It's very common with hurricanes that move up the eastern seaboard or move very close to the eastern seaboard, that you get this southeast wind off the Atlantic, pushing Atlantic moisture in. In the upper levels, you have a kind of a plume of moisture from connected to Helene, tropical moisture, that pushes north. So you're saturating the atmosphere, and now you have these strong winds crashing into the mountains. So this is the predecessor event. There was a foot of rain in the southern Appalachians even before Helene, right there, made landfall. So now Helene makes landfall, right? And it crashes into the mountains. The mountains are pretty big, pretty tall. And as soon as the storm hits the mountains, it gets wrung out like a sponge. We call it orographic lifting. It forces the air upward. So, Val, I'm sure you remember watching me on the air talking about North Carolina. And I know that people must have been wondering, why does he keep talking about North Carolina? We're a Tampa station, and yet he keeps mentioning this catastrophic flooding that's going to happen in North Carolina. It was because I knew it was going to be an event that we would never forget. But still, Val, despite all the meteorological knowledge that I have, to translate that into pictures of what that would mean and what it would look like, I couldn't do it. My imagination is not nearly good enough to capture the results and the impacts of Helene.
Yeah, those images, especially everybody sharing things on social media, they were devastating. They truly were. So many lives lost too. I think that for me, that's what's the most devastating. You know, homes and things. You know, you think are just things, but life is priceless. And
I think we're going to see more. I think we're going to see more. You know, you know, look, there are rumors flying around about, you know, bodies in morgues, and I don't know what's true and what's not true. We'll find out over the next couple of weeks, but there's very little communication. I know someone who was online yesterday for water for hours, and they got 1 gallon of water.
wow.
You know, so it's really, really tough right now because there's very few ways of actually getting in to the location, to help people. And obviously, you know, I donated a little bit of money. I'm planning on donating again tomorrow. And if you have the resources to help, please do so.
Yes, there's actually going to be, we here at WFLA have partnered up at News Channel 8 with the American Red Cross. Is that right?
Yeah.
There should be, there's a streaming event going on tomorrow.
Across all of our next star stations. Yeah.
To raise funds and help those in need.
Yeah. So this is a tough one. And what I think about a lot is that nobody expected, despite the fact that there was a Cat 4, and I say no one, I mean the general public. Us meteorologists, we knew it was coming. I don't think we ever envisioned it being as devastating as it was, because it's really hard to translate forecasting and knowledge of what's going to happen to pictures and images of what's going to happen. And it was, I think, we really knew it would be a devastating flood in the Carolinas, but to see whole towns wiped off the map is difficult. So that's what I really want to focus on here is, you know, what made this such a perfect storm, you know, to put it in probably not the best terms. You know, it was rapidly intensifying when it hit the coast. There were like 5,000 lightning strikes in 1 hour right before the storm made landfall in the Big Bend. It shows you that it was still trying to gain energy. Because it was also, by the way, moving like 25 miles an hour. You combine a storm that's intensifying, that's moving really fast, like a bullet on land, it carries its water and it carries its wind far inland. So we ended up with millions of people without power in Georgia. Huge trees toppled over on top of people's homes. Even there, they were shocked by what happened. And then the worst impact of it all, it hits the mountains with the ground saturated, a foot of rain on the ground. And look at how much rain, Val. I'll just press play one more time so you can see the storm kind of making its way up. I'll put it in full so everybody can see it. There it is crashing into the mountains. It got captured by an upper level low, which was in itself an interesting meteorological phenomenon. And here is how much rainfall fell. This is what Doppler radar estimates. So we measured up to 31 inches. But when you do the Doppler radar estimates, you can actually start to find higher totals because there's only so many observations, only so many weather sensors, and especially in the mountains, it's tough to find them. Yeah. The peaks of these mountains had up to 45 inches, potentially close to 4 feet of rainfall, Val.
Wow.
And that is devastating to mountain towns because the water just runs off the mountains into the valley. So with all that said, again, we asked if you had questions, we would love to answer them. So please put your questions on our Facebook page. And in addition to that, we also can talk a little bit about what's going to be happening next week because I know there's a lot of people who probably would like to discuss what's going to be happening next week as well.
Let's see what we have here. We have some comments. This is a comment from Neil. He's saying that he thought the same thing when Ian hit. People forgot quick. I guess that
Ian produced 15 feet of surge in Fort Myers Beach. This storm, there's very few places up in this particular area south of Perry near Steinhatchee, Cedar Key to the west of that. We know that there was at least 15 feet. It could have been more than that. But this storm did have, in fact, more power than Ian. And so it had an ability to push even more water on shore. And that was, the most shocking thing for people here in the Bay Area. We hope we never see this again, but I think if it happens anytime in the near future, people will remember that even if you don't get hit by the eye of the storm, you can still take it almost a direct hit in terms of storm surge.
We have a message from Brittany. She says, I don't know. I think that it was an eye-opener for more than just Florida. So I think that with this storm, I guess that it is true, right? So many other states affected as well.
Yeah, and Val, it's worth bringing this up too. So there were lots of natural reasons why this storm was as strong as it was. And this disaster would have happened regardless of climate change, to make that clear. However, climate change did make it significantly worse. Now, we have a study that came out, and Val, this person because we've had him on our show, Dr. Michael Weiner.
Oh, yeah.
From Berkeley Labs.
That's right.
He is the world's, foremost expert on this. He examined rain in storms like Harvey. In fact, he did many papers on Harvey and examined how climate change impacted Harvey's rainfall. What he found is fairly astonishing. Even for someone like me, I couldn't have expected numbers like this. In the dark shades of green, northern Georgia, the western part of North Carolina, eastern North Carolina, this storm created 50% more rain than it otherwise would have without climate change. So what does that mean? 50% more rain. It means if this storm dropped 20 inches of rain in 1900, today, in some places, it dropped 30 inches of rain. So it takes a severe/extreme event and it makes it an absolute catastrophic event. That's what climate change does. It makes it worse. And, there are only so many coincidences that can happen, like has happened in the Tampa Bay area this summer with the tremendous flooding, the excess rain from Debbie, a 1 in a 500-year event. If you remember, even before Debbie, there was another big rain. Remember in Sarasota, downtown Sarasota? Yeah. There was that 12 inches of rain one day that was earlier this spring or early this summer. And so essentially 3 1 in 1,000-year type events or 1 in 500-year events in one summer. At some point, it's no longer coincidence. Climate change is making these more likely, and it's certainly making them more intense. Yeah.
I do have a question. Sure. This is from Vanessa, Vanessa Hall-Williams. She says, if the storm was closer, would the storm surge be that bad?
Yeah, it would have been worse, actually. So that's a great question. If we got hit by the core, the middle of the storm that moved right over Perry, we would have seen, I would say, no kidding, 15 to 20 feet of storm surge in Pinellas County and Hillsborough County in Tampa Bay. In fact, the surge would have been worse than it was up north in the Big Bend. And that's because Tampa Bay is like a bathtub, right? You put water in it and it captures the water. The water is funneled into the bay by the onshore winds, and it got nowhere to go. And actually, believe it or not, the worst flooding would have been in downtown Tampa and Davis Islands, which is where we saw some of the worst flooding in Davis Islands. It's because the bay comes to like a peak or an apex, and the water at that point, it's got nowhere to go anymore, so it can't spread out. It does spread out, but it also goes straight up. So 15, I would pretty much guarantee we would have had near 20 feet of storm surge in downtown Tampa.
Something that
if it hit directly,
Something I'm just thinking about is I wonder what other storms have caused this much damage without a direct impact. I wonder if we could like just go back and kind of see that, because I feel like we're going to start seeing that more now, even if there's no direct impact. Storm surge, for instance, of what we saw, or a huge rain event could be devastating for areas. And, we're so vulnerable here because even at 100, what was it, 100 miles?
100 miles west of St. Pete.
We saw these effects. Brittany, I'm sorry, did you want to?
Well, so I should say that these mountain storms happen, and on average every 30 years or so. We've seen it happen a few times this past century, where major flooding, Agnes is something that comes to mind, a big flooding from storms that smack into the mountains and dump all their rain. So it's not uncommon, and that's why we knew that this was going to be a catastrophic event for the Carolinas. It's simply that climate change, the warmer atmosphere, warmer water made it that much worse. Now, Val, we talk a lot about, and I'm going to be slightly nerdy for a second because I want you to know the mathematical relationships. Real simple.
I don't have my buzzer with me.
I know.
So
I'm not going to get to. It's going to be very simple. For every 2-degree increase in air temperature, you get an 8% increase in moisture in the atmosphere. Okay. Yeah. But in tropical cyclones, it's about double that. So it's about 16% more moisture is available. Now, if your storm has strong winds, that increases the rain rates too. So when you add all that up, you're between 40 and 50% more rain because of climate change in a storm like Helene. That's huge. It's a huge amount of extra rainfall. Gulf of Mexico water temperatures were about 3 degrees Fahrenheit above normal. Really, in fact, record hot in the eastern Gulf of Mexico. And air temperatures are about 3 degrees warmer than they used to be, let's say, 100 years ago. So that all told is that much extra energy available to the atmosphere to create problems. But like I said before, this has happened before. Yeah. Way before climate change was really a thing, in that these storms hit the mountains and they cause disastrous impacts. Yeah. That is a meteorological, not a climate change phenomenon.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, so Brittany has a follow-up question, and she says, if this storm would have packed rain for Florida, like Little Debbie, would it still have been as bad or worse for the Big Bend or other states?
Well, we didn't get much rain, right? Only 2 to 3 inches of rain or so. Yeah. I think it would have been worse for us, obviously, because we would have had to deal with the flooding from the rain and the flooding from the storm surge. We'd have more water in our homes. And I think a lot of places that didn't flood from storm surge, look, you didn't flood from storm surge unless you were right, pretty close to the
on
bay.
The water,
West Shore Boulevard, unfortunately, up and down. South Tampa, near Bayshore Boulevard, parts of downtown. Yeah. Right. But you get a few blocks in, several blocks in, and now all of a sudden there's no more flooding. But if we had a foot of rain, all that area would have been flooded too, and we would have been talking about flooding in people's homes that are elevated off of sea level. So it would have been worse for the Tampa Bay area if we got the rainfall. And speaking of Val, why don't we? Do you have another question? Yeah,
I have a comment I wanted to share from Nicole Noel. She says, "Yeah, the water around Port Tampa came from all directions. We were trapped." So that's just an example of somebody that was surrounded by water, just like you were saying.
Yeah, and that was one of the highest surge numbers in Port Tampa, which, again, I'm not surprised about because the water funnels in there. Now, here in the station, we can say that we were surrounded by water because we're right on the Hillsborough River. So the Hillsborough River basically took over our station. And the only way that we could get out is I had to walk through about 2 feet of water and then walk through the condo apartment building next door. We had to knock on the door, have them open the door for us, walk through the building, come out the other side because it was a little less water on the other side of the building. I mean, it's a minor story when you think about all the devastation that people had to deal with. But, even we were somewhat trapped. We lost power. We almost lost our signal. Luckily, our backup generators got us through.
Yeah.
So you know what, Val? I'm sure that people can have more questions about Helene, but why don't we talk about what's happening in the tropics elsewhere, okay?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's see if anybody has any questions in regards to that area that we're watching. But
so
go ahead.
Okay, so there's Tropical Depression 13 near the Cape Verde Islands. We expect that to become a hurricane, maybe eventually a major hurricane. Kirk is already a major hurricane. It's a Cat 3. That'll probably become a Cat 4. And then we have what's going on in the Gulf of Mexico right now, which, by the way, has been downgraded to 30% as of a few minutes ago. Not too long. Yeah. So it's still going to be a storm. Nothing is going to change except the National Hurricane Center is saying, hey, this is going to be a storm, but it may not be a tropical named storm. It may become a depression, but there's still some chance, 30%, that it'll become a named storm. And it's going to produce a lot of rain. So let me show you the future cast from the European model. And there's two areas, two axes, two disturbances essentially where we have moisture. Those will all come together into one. Luckily for us, there's going to be a front that's going to move down south towards the northern Gulf Coast. It's going to provide a ton of wind shear. So this system, as it tries to get organized, you can see it's kind of elongated on Sunday. You can see low pressure, right? You see that counterclockwise flow.
Yeah.
So low pressure is there, but it's so elongated and it doesn't have a closed circulation with thunderstorms around it that it's likely not a real bona fide named system, but it may be. It'll be close. We'll see. But either way, look at all the rain and tropical moisture that's pouring our way starting later Sunday into Monday and Tuesday. Here's the good news, Val.
Yeah.
Once this does pass, I think it'll probably pass through starting Wednesday and Thursday. We're actually probably going to get our first shot of real fall-like drier air, lower dew points.
Now
so this
you're talking.
will probably close the door on rainy season.
We need that.
The rainiest season on record in Tampa Bay area, in parts of the Tampa Bay area that we've ever seen.
Yeah.
So this will be welcome. And by the way, I showed a graphic earlier today. Not only was it the rainiest on record for much of the Bay Area close to the coast, but it was also the most oppressive by far. Listen to this. In St. Petersburg, there were 100 so far, and it's still going, 117 days where the heat index topped 100 degrees. The average in St. Pete is 43 days. So instead of 43 days, we had 117 days where the heat index was over 100, and we broke the record set last year, 88 days with a heat index over 100. This year, 117 days so far.
Wow.
So just all this extra moisture in the atmosphere is making it that much more oppressive and making the rains that much heavier, and so on and so forth.
We could feel it.
Yeah.
It was a hot one.
For sure.
Even with all that rain, the rain really never cooled us down at all. You know, maybe
For a
at
moment,
one or
for
two
like a
degrees,
second.
I would,
Yeah.
you know, but no. Okay.
It's true. It's true because last year we had no rain, and actually last summer was the hottest summer on record. This is the most oppressive and most humid summer on record.
Sticky.
We would have probably we had rain, which helped us cool down a little. This would have probably been the hottest on record. Last year was the hottest on record. So it's just year after year we keep 2022 is the hottest on record. Then it's 2023. Then it's 2024. So that's the rainfall we expect starting on Sunday and into Monday and Tuesday. And you can see that we're on the northern edge here. We're going to have drier air kind of competing against it. But you never know where that 3 to 6 is going to be.
Right.
Is it going to be right over Tampa Bay? Is it going to be south towards Sarasota and Bradenton? You know, or is that 1 to 3 going to be on the nature coast, or is it going to push further south to Tampa? Right now, it looks like from Tampa north 1 to 3, from Tampa south 3 to 6, and then South Florida. I got to tell you, some of the models in Naples show 15 inches of rain.
Yeah.
They could really get a deluge, and I think they will somewhere in Florida, and it probably is going to be the southern half of the state. Starting Sunday into Monday, Tuesday, and maybe Wednesday as well.
Yeah, that's what it looks like from looking at this. It definitely seems that the southern tip is going to get much more rain than maybe our nature coast.
Yeah, and I think that probably they're happy about that on the nature.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, Val.
Yeah.
Being someone who now does the weather for a living, what did you learn? What surprised you, and what could we have done better as a team in communicating the risks?
Oh,
of this
great
storm?
questions. Great questions. Well, what surprised me was that we didn't get tropical rains that I thought that we would get. We would feel more tropical storm-like rain is what I thought that we were going to see.
Yeah, like heavier rainfall.
Heavier rainfall. What surprised me was the damage that the storm surge caused. Just like you said, I know that we were saying these were going to be historical storm surge numbers that we were looking at. However,
but what does that mean, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
what does that mean? And unfortunately, now we know. And I think that, hopefully folks won't forget. And this image will stay present. For me, it was scary. I'm not going to lie. It was scary because just like you were just telling the story about how you walked through the water to try to get home that night, I wasn't as brave. And I brought my blow-up mattress and I slept at the station because I did not know what could be out there. I just didn't trust,
Walking through muck, because it was muck. This wasn't clean water.
And I know that you have you live closer to the station, so it would have been much safer for you. But I didn't know, and I guess
you had PTSD.
I did.
So tell them why you had PTSD.
I had PTSD because recently we had a huge rain event where it rained for 45 minutes.
Right, and people remember that because all of South Tampa was flooded and St. Petersburg was flooded.
That's right.
Yeah.
And when I tried going home, I almost got stuck. I could see people were getting stuck in front of me. They were pushing cars in front of me. I had never experienced anything like it. And it scared me because I thought, well, at that time, there were people and neighbors out on the sidewalks kind of guiding me and telling me, turn around, you can go, turn right on this side. And I was able to get out of it and get home safely. Even the street where I live was completely flooded. My neighbors who lived there for over 30 years had told me, we've never seen our street flood this way. And, it was definitely a one in a lifetime event.
I hear a lot of people say that we've never seen anything like this before. But you hear that over and over again
now. Yeah.
Now, as a meteorologist, Val, I follow what's going on around the world as well, and every single day, believe it or not, there is a flood like that in one or two or even three places. I think I showed you on my Twitter feed.
Yeah.
That was really just the first 15 days of September. We didn't even include the last ones, but I mean, all over the world, Val. We saw horrible flooding in Austria, in Poland, this year, in Italy, in Africa. And this is an interesting thing. One of the reasons that we had such a quiet hurricane season during the middle of the peak, almost, of hurricane season, was because all the waves that were coming off Africa, instead of going through the Sahel like they usually do, they were moving into the Sahara Desert, causing disastrous flooding in the places that actually are inhabited near the Sahara Desert. And it wasn't until now when the planet started to cool down that these seedlings or these tropical waves moved back into the Sahel and then exited the African coast south of the Cape Verde Islands, and so they could develop. But earlier in the summer, they were exiting north of the Cape Verde Islands where it's too cold and it's too dry. And so it shut down our hurricane season for like a month and a half, and we were scratching our heads like, what is going on here? But it could just simply be a sign of the times and a sign of our future, which is we keep warming up Africa so much that it pushes the intertropical convergence zone north into the Sahara Desert. The Sahara Desert starts to green, which, by the way, it started to green this summer. And then as soon as it starts pushing south, then all of a sudden it gets active in the tropical Atlantic like it is right now. I mean, look at what's happening. This is October 1st, not August 15th. Yeah. We have two systems in the eastern tropical Atlantic, and let me put it up for you. Yeah. Two systems in the eastern tropical Atlantic, as you see right there, and we're likely going to have another one in a few days emerging off Africa in October and developing into a tropical system. That is really abnormal stuff, folks. We don't see that. So our season has been backloaded. Now, it probably is not going to end up being the season that we thought originally, which is, we were going to probably have to start using the second alphabet. We're going to go through all the first alphabet and have
the second list.
We might not get there because it was so quiet for like a month, but we're making up a lot of ground very fast in the tropics right now with all these systems trying to develop.
So do you think we're going to see storms leading into late November as well?
We did in 2020. If you remember, in 2020 we had two storms that hit the same parts of Honduras and Nicaragua. It was Eta and then Iota, a couple of weeks apart, both Cat 4s, and they hit within 15 miles of each other, displaced something like 600,000 people in those countries. Terrible, and caused mass migration to the U.S. during that particular year. And they were very late season storms. It's very hard for November storms to get to us because we have a strong jet stream. It can happen. Yeah. It has happened. Yeah. But it's rare. It's more likely that there will probably be some activity in the Caribbean, but it will probably stay to the south. Fingers crossed that it doesn't get to us. Yeah. But I do think that we'll probably end up seeing activity lasting later into the season because water temperatures are still record warm, and it just seems like everything has simply just been pushed later in the season this year.
Later, yeah, probably. Yeah. Well, let me see if we have. I'm just going to eye any other questions or comments.
Yep, absolutely. While you're doing that, I'm gonna bring up the graphic full and let people see. That 40%er has now been reduced, folks, to a 30%er, which is great, across the Gulf. Again, we're not concerned about any kind of strong storm forming. What we're more concerned about is how much rain it ends up producing in Florida. We don't need any more rain. And the jury is out on exactly who's going to get the heaviest stuff, but it does look like the southern half of the state will most likely get that because as that front, you're about to see a front pop up on the screen right there. As that front pushes to the south, it should actually push the whole system further and further south next week. So it's still active in the tropics close to home, but we're not looking at anything nearly as impactful as Hurricane Helene, thankfully. And we really need as much of a break as we can so that we can continue our recovery process. Not ideal that it's going to pour early next week, but hopefully it won't be that bad around the Bay Area.
Yeah. Folks just commenting on how when it rains also it tends to flood. There's certain areas in the Tampa Bay area that tend to flood with just rain. So just people making comments about how, they're seeing this now. And it, like you said, they're seeing the worst that they've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's kind of like the the consensus.
We will have to see what happens next year, and see if we keep getting these 1 in 100, 1 in 500, 1 in 1,000 year floods. But one thing that I am concerned about is what does that mean, again, for insurance? Think about it. It's not just homeowners. Now it's car insurance. You know how many people lost their cars?
Yeah.
Florida already has some of the highest car insurance.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be difficult. Then we worry about homeowners insurance. And
here's the thing, though. Homeowners insurance is not just going to affect the people that live on the coastline. It's going to affect everybody because everybody's going to have to chip into the pot. It's
that's
not
the way
just
it works. People inland that don't get as much damage offset the cost for the people near the coast, but everybody's costs are going up.
Yeah.
The poor people in North Carolina who did not have flood insurance, and by the way, if you're living in Western North Carolina, the chance that you have flood insurance is slim to almost none. Mm-hmm. Very few, if any, people had flood insurance.
That's so sad.
I mean, it is such a disaster. So one more time, we'll say we're going to have a bit of an online telethon tomorrow. Mm-hmm. I think it's between 3 and 4 p.m. So if you want to donate, please do so. Come to this stream. I think JB will be here as well, and we're going to have our corporate folks. So it's going to be all of Nexstar. We have like 100 plus stations across the country, a lot more than that actually. And I personally know that I'm going to donate at least one more time. I did once before, but
yeah.
And the other thing is, one of the reasons I love the Bay Area is I love to go to the beaches. I love to go to the Barrier Islands. I spend a lot of time on St. Pete Beach. Yep. I spend a lot of time on Sunset Beach, which is in Treasure Island. That area is so beautiful, and it has been hit hard so many times since I got back to Tampa. I've been back now 3 years, but of course I used to frequent Sunset Beach.
Before,
when
many
20
moons
years
ago.
and Sunset Beach on Treasure Island has been hit like 3 or 4 times in the last 3 years. It's just over and over and over again. And this time, for many, it was a fatal blow because the water just swept right through these people's homes. Yeah. And, it's not just Sunset. It's Anna Maria Island, where most of the island has been impacted tremendously. Clearwater Beach. I mean, the list goes on and on.
Yeah. I mean, the majority of our coastal locations have been hit one way or another. Even our southern counties, our coastal areas.
Yeah, and this was broad, right? It wasn't just one small area, which often happens. The storm was so big, its arms were so long, it just pushed that water all across our coast. So hard to believe that you would be talking about this being, anywhere from the southern part of Sarasota County all the way up to the far reaches of the northern part of the Bay Area. But that's what happens when you have a really big storm. And there are lessons that we learned, and hopefully we can take that lesson to the next storm that hits us. And hopefully it's no time soon. Yeah.
And in terms, I guess I didn't finish my idea when you asked me, like, what else could we have done better? I think that, we did great. I think that the team did amazing in trying to do and keep people safe. And I think that, there's always room for improvement. So, I think you're doing great going out into the community. Like you ask your tech today, your X-ray tech, you said, right? Did you get?
Oh yeah, no, I'm asking people who tell me that they suffered, from the storm. I just want to know what could have changed your mind.
But I love it that she was honest with you. Was it a she?
Yeah, and she didn't even know who I was at first.
She didn't?
No, I told her halfway through. I said I told her why I was asking her. I just really genuinely want to know because we said it would be record surge. Yeah. We said it would be 2.5 feet or 2 to 3 feet higher than a dahlia. All that was right. And we figured, okay, people, if they've been through a dahlia and anybody near the water has experienced it, then they would know if it was 2 or 3 extra feet, they would know exactly how high the water was going to be in their house. And that's what it turned out to be.
Yeah.
But despite that, it didn't translate to, lift your couch off the ground. Right. Make sure your photos and your valuables are on the second floor. Move your car inland.
Yeah.
But when people texted me and said, "Hey, should I move my car?" I was like, "Yeah, move your car."
That's a great takeaway then.
But they didn't want to leave. You see, the people who texted me they were going to stay anyway on the barrier island. They just wanted to know if they should move their car.
Right.
And that's one of the problems that we have is when people are told to evacuate, sometimes they just don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And I think I've gotten to the point where I realize that people are going to make decisions for themselves, and there's nothing I can really do to stop them from it. Even during Hurricane Ian in Fort Myers Beach, so many people were like, they stayed. There are some people, Val, that just can't go. They're elderly. They don't have the means. They don't have a ride. They don't have a way to leave. That's something that we really need to be as cognizant of as we can. So if we know we have neighbors who we know are not capable of handling this themselves, maybe next time offer them a ride. Try to figure out how you can help them get off the island.
That's great suggestions.
Yeah. Okay. With that said, we are done for the night because we have the 10 and 11 o'clock show coming up. I want to thank you for joining me for Climate Classroom. By the way, I have a new article on the website. It's not called this, but go on our website, go to WFLA.com, and then click the weather tab and click Climate Classroom. And what's great about the article is that it's going to explain to you why this is such a unique storm. Why did it produce such surprising impacts? Despite the fact that we knew it was a Cat 4, why was it abnormal? Why was it an overperformer, if you will? So we have a whole article about that, and I think you'll find a lot of the stuff really interesting. I embedded a lot of tweets with a lot of unique information in it. All right, thank you everybody for joining me, and we'll see you next week for the Climate Classroom. Thank you, Val.
Till next time.
Watch or listen to Jeff's Climate Classroom, powered by Armor View Window and Door on WFLA social media platforms, and find Jeff's climate reports on WFLA.com.